So there's lots of lotteries, of course, pari-mutuels, horse and greyhound racing, and a lot of those racetracks are starting to introduce slot machines as a way to kind of help bring back the racing industry, which has been kind of slowly dying off. And so there's a few things that we'll talk about. One is that casinos can have a negative impact on some other industries. That's not unlike any other industry that opens. If a new restaurant opens, that might have a negative impact on other restaurants on the block in Charleston. But again, it's probably a good thing for consumers. And there's also some reason to believe that barriers to online gambling, which are not very effective anyway, will probably be removed in the near future. There was, and I'm not an expert on this law, but it was kind of a silly law put into effect in 2006 that tried to prevent, that basically aimed at not allowing banks to process transactions that had to do with online gambling. And then, of course, in South Carolina, we all know and love the lottery, which, you know, the South Carolina Education Lottery, how could you be against that? And so my view was, when I bought my tickets, I'm giving something back. I've been, you know, state employed for so long, why not give something back to the state? So I bought lottery tickets. And of course, you can find information on how much money the lottery provides to various organizations, but of course that doesn't mean all that much, because it doesn't tell you that there's that much additional money that's going into education or towards scholarships. The state government, after all, may be cutting other types of funds that it's giving to education. Video poker, now I just moved here in 2007, and video poker is not really one of my strong interests, but that was a big deal here in the late 90s, and so some of you probably know a lot more about this debate than I do. But video lottery terminals, VLTs, were banned here in 2000, and that was a big deal. And again, I'm not going to talk about it too much because I wasn't here, but even if you want to argue that gambling is a good thing because, you know, people should have the right to gamble, in terms of economic growth effects, these types of machines are not likely to have positive economic benefits other than whatever benefits the consumers get, because you're not having any new building go up. There's no new jobs created probably as a result of these things being there. So if you want to argue for some type of gambling to not create much benefit, this would be the easiest argument to say that these things don't do much good. You may remember Robert Ford, who ran for governor last year. One of his big policy proposals was to legalize casinos and bring back VLTs, which he still supports if you look at his website. And then the Mount Pleasant poker case, this is kind of irrelevant, but it's still interesting. If you're not familiar with the gambling laws here, here's an excerpt from it there in green. It's something like 200 years old, and basically bans any type of game of chance, whether or not money is being gambled. When I teach the economics and gambling class, I have Bob Cimento, who's one of the defendants in this case, which is now at the Supreme Court. He comes in and talks about when they got busted, and you know, the cops putting guns to their heads, you know, rounding them up in their card game. It's pretty interesting. But hopefully that'll change. But you know, it hasn't yet, so who knows? But it's kind of an interesting law. I like the outhouse. That must have a different meaning. I think of that as a portable toilet. Back in the old days, that must have meant a kitchen or something. I don't know.
No, it was
an
outhouse.
Okay, so don't play cards on the highway or anything.
Especially 95.
Okay, so we have no commercial casinos. I've heard talk of someone trying to develop a tribal casino in the upstate, but I don't think that's gone anywhere. I haven't followed that. There is a riverboat casino in Myrtle Beach, and of course North Charleston has just recently kind of paved the way for a casino there. And I think one of the articles on there is the op-ed I wrote. I actually wrote that back in July, and the Post and Courier sat on it for some reason until like September. But it kind of gives you what I think is likely to happen. Now, a lawyer just told me that the international water line is actually 7 miles. It had been, as far as I've known, 3. But last May, I went to the Riverboat Casino in Savannah, which the North Charleston City Council visited. And for some reason, after that visit, they decided, well, this would be great for Charleston to have. Now, have any of you been to the the Riverboat Casino in Savannah. If you're ever in Savannah, go there. It's an experience. I went there with a group of students as kind of a field trip type thing. When we got there, it was like a gravel parking lot with this old wooden sign. It looked like I almost said we probably shouldn't do this. It looks like we might go in there and get robbed. It's just a terrible example of a riverboat casino. I can't imagine what the city council was thinking when I went there. And they thought, oh, this would be great for Charleston. It's just, I was astonished by that they went there and then thought, this is a great idea for Charleston. Anyway, it's going to happen here. I don't know what the boat they're going to bring, here, but hopefully it's a little bit of a nicer one than that one. It reminded me actually of back when I was growing up in the 70s. I remember my grandparents had these houseboats, like the Ozarks, and it was just, that's what it reminded me of, like an old houseboat. Anyway, so finally, on to the real question we're here supposed to consider. Would it be good for the casino, good for the economy to have casinos? And then I'll kind of try to relate this back to the North Charleston issue. Now, one thing that's interesting is that unlike a lot of other businesses, every single aspect of casinos are regulated by government. Whether they can open, how many of them can open, the size of them, how many games they can have, the payouts they can have. In other words, how much money can they keep from the games, the taxes on the casinos. Every single aspect of it is regulated. And so it has to have permission, explicit permission of government to come in. And so for government, of course, it's a great deal. It's a very easy way for them to come up with a new way to raise revenue. Now, some people will argue, some economists even will argue that gambling is different and casinos are different. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I see these as a voluntary transaction like any other way you may choose to spend your money. Both parties benefit. For whatever reason, maybe I'm stupid, I thought, oh, I might win the lottery. I know that odds are 176 million to 1, but, you know, as they say, the people selling lottery, you can't win if you don't play. So. And then I actually enjoyed thinking for an hour or two what I would do if I won. So that's some entertainment back there. Yeah. Buy myself a bigger office. Or something.
Tribute to the Bastiat Society.
Yeah. Okay, so as a result of the casinos being regulated, the tax rates on these are extremely high. They range from, in Nevada, off the top, total revenues are taxed at about 6% in Nevada. That's the lowest. And then, of course, the companies pay income taxes just like they would. In Pennsylvania, the tax rate is 55%. So off the top, the state first takes 55%, then they pay income tax and all that. And taxes range across the board. Illinois at one point raised them to like 70%, but then they backed it down to 50, and I think that's where it is currently.
That's without the federal involvement?
Yes, that's just at the state.
What do you?
There's no federal regulations at all. So the federal
tax.
Yeah, you still have to pay, if you're a private company, you still have to pay your income taxes after that.
So you're saying that's off the top line revenue?
Yeah, gross gaming revenues. So whatever they bring in.
And then whatever the net is. They're paying on the net also?
Yes. So it's a, you know, in some states it's a pretty serious tax. And a lot of the casino companies will say, why should we bother going to Illinois?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah, Indiana.
Excuse me, you're saying the revenues, not the gross receipts. You're not talking about the total number of dollars that are bet. You're talking about the tax on the amount of money that the casinos make.
Right. Gross gaming revenue is what they call it. So,
it's
if
not gross receipts. It's not gross receipts, it's a net.
Okay.
They pay for the hotel. The terminology's off. We're all business guys, so.
What they get to keep. Okay, let me see if I explain. Okay, so handle is the term called for how much is bet at the casino. So if I go in and bet $100, I buy $100 worth of chips. It's what they keep after paying out winning bets. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. That's the revenue that is taxed at 55%. And then once they do all their expenses and have profits, then they pay income taxes just like a normal company. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's very, they're taxed twice, right?
Yeah. Well, operating.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Any other questions about that? Is that clear? So if we set the slot machine and we all play and it brings in $100, in Pennsylvania you have to send $55 of it to the government, then you have $45 of income, which you can offset your expenses and then pay taxes on your net income. See, I did learn something here in accounting. I can't do my own taxes. So. Well, I pay someone who uses TurboTax. Pay him. Okay, so still, though, the industry can make a profit because it's a legal monopoly, right? The government restricts, they may offer you the only casino in the state, and if that's the case, you can afford maybe to pay 50% taxes. The state of Kansas is the first state to actually own the casino industry, and so they actually own the casinos and then hire operating companies. And Canada is set up a lot like that, where the government owns the industry, and so of course they can take money. So, you might argue that gambling is immoral, and that would be an argument for opposing casinos. You might argue, I don't like this activity going on near me, and that's a legitimate argument. It's not the same economic argument. But I want to talk a little bit about what research has been done, which is, I think, useful because it can help if politicians are interested in what is actually happening. If they want evidence, there is some people that are studying this. A lot of people in psychology, sociology and medicine look at problem gambling. That's an argument for having gambling illegal, just like it would be an argument against legalized drugs or restrictions on alcohol, is that some people will develop problems. Now the percentage is pretty much agreed on that it's maybe 1 to 3% of the population will develop a gambling problem. And what that means is they end up negatively affecting their family or their career or their friends. They do too much of the activity. And so there's reason to be sympathetic with that, that maybe there should at least be some type of regulation, you could argue, on that basis. The medical people, the brain imaging is the newest area of research, which I haven't learned enough about yet.
PET scans.
I need to, yeah. And so that will really help these people understand why people gamble to an extent that is and there's tons of money if you're a psychologist. So if I was like gambling, I should have gone into psychology instead of economics. But, anyway, in economics, the focus is on what are the political issues, and those are employment, tax revenues, social costs, and one kind of subcategory of social costs, you could argue, is how does this affect other industries, so inter-industry relationships. So these are some issues that I've looked at over the years and tried to provide or develop some empirical evidence for. Economic growth effects, mainly at the state level, whether the introduction of casinos has an impact on that, how different gambling industries affect each other. So if we do have casinos here in South Carolina, would that affect the lottery in a negative way? And if the goal is for all of this just to maximize our tax revenue, which I think is the political goal, so that's the third thing, government revenue. Social cost of gambling, which I think is one of the most interesting issues, and then problems measuring costs of